sold as useless by her family. She was given a cabin and married by a lonely mountain man. The wagon stopped at the edge of nowhere, and Linda Hayes felt her heart drop into her stomach. Her father didn't even look at her as he tossed her worn bag onto the dusty ground. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the barren stretch of land that would become her prison. "This is it," her father said, his voice flat and final. "The cabin's over that ridge. Your husband's waiting." Linda's hands trembled as she climbed down from the wagon. She had never met the man she was being given to like unwanted livestock. Her family had made it clear she was a burden they could no longer afford. At 22, unmarried and considered plain by her mother's cruel standards, she had become nothing more than another mouth to feed during hard times. The wagon pulled away without ceremony, wheels kicking up clouds of red dust that stuck to her throat. Linda stood alone with her single bag, staring at the rocky path that led upward into pine-covered mountains. Somewhere up there, a stranger waited to claim her. She forced her feet to move. The path was steep and treacherous, lined with sharp stones that threatened to tear through her thin boots. Sweat soaked through her faded dress as she climbed higher, her breathing growing ragged in the thin mountain air. The silence was absolute, except for the crunch of her footsteps and the distant cry of a hawk. After an hour of climbing, she saw it. A small log cabin sat in a clearing, smoke rising from its chimney. The structure was rough but solid, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to watch her approach. Her legs felt like water as she forced herself to keep walking. The cabin door opened before she reached it. A man stepped out onto the porch, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. Linda stopped walking, her breath catching in her chest. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You, Linda?" His voice was deep and rough, like gravel scraping against wood. "Yes." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. He studied her for a long moment, his face still obscured by shadow. Then he stepped aside and jerked his head toward the open door. "Get inside. Storm's coming." Linda glanced at the clear blue sky, confused, but the sharp edge in his tone left no room for argument. She picked up her bag and walked past him into the dim interior of the cabin. The door shut behind her with a heavy thud that sounded like a cell closing, and she realized with cold certainty that her old life was gone forever. The cabin was smaller than it had appeared from outside. A single room held everything. A stone fireplace with a crackling fire, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed pushed against the far wall, and shelves lined with supplies. Everything was neat and orderly, almost military in its precision. The smell of pine smoke and coffee filled the air. The man moved past her without a word and poured himself a cup of coffee from a pot hanging over the fire. His movements were efficient and controlled, like someone who had lived alone for a very long time. In the firelight, Linda could finally see his face. He was younger than she expected, maybe 30, with sharp features and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, giving him a dangerous appearance. "There's bread and dried meat on the shelf," he said, not looking at her. "Help yourself if you're hungry." Linda set her bag down carefully. "Thank you, Mr. Cole Bennett." He took a long drink of coffee. "No Mr. needed. Just Cole." She nodded, unsure what to say. The silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Cole showed no interest in conversation, standing by the fire with his back partially to her, as if she were just another piece of furniture he had acquired. "I should tell you," Linda began, her voice shaking slightly. "I can cook and clean. I can mend clothes and tend a garden. I'll earn my keep here." Cole turned to look at her then, his expression unreadable. "Your father already told me what you can do. That's why I agreed to this arrangement." The bluntness of his words stung, but Linda forced herself to stand straight. "What exactly did my father tell you?" "That you needed a home, and I needed help running this place." He gestured around the cabin. "I trap and hunt. I'm gone sometimes for days. This cabin needs someone to maintain it, and I need hot meals when I return. It's a fair trade." A trade, that's all she was. A transaction. Linda swallowed, the bitter taste in her mouth. "And what are your expectations of me as a wife?" Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. "You'll have the bed. I'll sleep on the floor by the fire. You do your work, I'll do mine. We stay out of each other's way." Relief and something else, something she couldn't quite name, flooded through her. "That's all?" "That's all." He set his coffee cup down with a thud. "I don't need complications. I just need someone reliable." Before Linda could respond, a sound outside made Cole's entire body go rigid. His hand moved instantly to the rifle mounted above the door. The casual man from a moment ago vanished, replaced by someone coiled tight and ready for violence. "Get away from the window," he said quietly, his voice deadly calm. Linda's heart hammered as she pressed herself against the wall. "What is it?" "Riders." "3 of them." Cole checked his rifle with practiced efficiency. "Coming up the mountain trail fast." "Are they dangerous?" Cole's laugh was bitter and short. "Everyone's dangerous out here." The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, and then voices called out from outside. "Bennett, we know you're in there." "Send out the woman." Linda's blood turned to ice. Cole's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He moved to the window, keeping low, and peered out through a gap in the shutters. "You know them?" Linda whispered. "Jake Miller and his brothers." Cole's voice was hard as granite. "They run cattle on the eastern slope. Been trouble for months. What do they want with me?" Cole looked at her then, and something in his eyes made her stomach clench. "Your father owed them money, gambling debts. When he couldn't pay, he promised them first pick of his daughters." The room spun. Linda grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "He sold me twice?" "Looks that way." Cole turned back to the window. "But you're on my land now, and I don't let anyone take what's mine." The words should have comforted her, but the possessive edge in his tone sent a chill down her spine. Outside, Jake Miller's voice rang out again, angrier this time. "We got legal claim, Bennett." Her father signed papers. Cole opened the cabin door just wide enough to shout back, "She's my wife now. You got a problem with that? Take it up with the law in town." "The law?" Jake's laugh was ugly. "We're 3 days from any law, and you know it. Send her out or we'll come in and get her." Linda watched as Cole's finger moved to the rifle's trigger. His face was carved from stone, utterly calm despite the threat outside. This was a man who had faced death before and wasn't afraid to face it again. "First man through that door dies," Cole said, his voice carrying clearly into the yard. "Second man probably dies too. Third man might get me, but he'll have 2 dead brothers to bury. That a trade you want to make, Jake?" The silence that followed was deafening. Linda could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Everything her father had told her about this being a simple arrangement, a quiet life in the mountains, had been lies. She had been thrown into the middle of something dangerous, and the stranger she had married was the only thing standing between her and whatever those men outside intended. "You're bluffing, Bennett," Jake finally called out, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Try me and find out." More silence. Linda could hear the horses shifting nervously outside, the creak of leather saddles. Then Jake spoke again, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "This ain't over. We'll be back, and next time you won't have that rifle pointed at us." "I'll look forward to it," Cole said coldly. The sound of hoofbeats retreated down the mountain trail. Cole remained at the window, watching, the rifle still ready in his hands. Long minutes passed before his shoulders finally relaxed and he lowered the weapon. Linda found her voice. "They'll really come back, won't they?" "Yes." Cole set the rifle back above the door with careful precision. "Jake Miller doesn't forget a grudge, and he doesn't like being told no." "How much did my father owe them?" $500. Cole poured himself another cup of coffee, his hands steady despite what had just happened. "Your father's been running debts all over the territory." The Millers weren't the only ones he made promises to. Linda sank into one of the wooden chairs, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. "What have I walked into?" "Trouble." Cole studied her with those storm-gray eyes. "Question is, can you handle it?" She looked up at him, anger finally breaking through her fear. "Do I have a choice? You just told those men I'm yours now. What am I supposed to do, walk back down that mountain and hope they don't catch me?" Something flickered across Cole's face, almost like respect. "No. You stay here, you learn to shoot, and you learn to survive. This mountain doesn't care about your feelings, and neither do the men who want what's on it." "What's on it?" Linda stood up, meeting his gaze. "What makes this land so valuable that men would kill for it?" Cole was quiet for a moment, weighing whether to trust her with the truth. Finally, he walked to the back wall of the cabin and pulled aside a heavy bearskin rug. Underneath was a trap door. He lifted it, revealing a dark space below. "Come look." Linda approached cautiously and peered down into the cellar. Even in the dim light filtering down from above, she could see what Cole wanted her to see. Stacks of furs, dozens of them, thick and luxurious pelts worth a fortune in any trading post. "This is just one season's take," Cole said quietly. "The streams on this mountain are thick with beaver, fox, and mink. The hunting is better here than anywhere else in the territory. That's why I built this cabin so far from town. That's why the Millers want this land. That's why your father thought he could use you to make deals." Linda stared at the fortune beneath her feet. And you live up here all alone? Guarding this? Lived alone. Cole let the trapdoor fall shut with a heavy thud and replaced the rug. Until today. The Millers have been testing my boundaries for months, running their cattle onto my land, checking to see if I'll fight back. Your arrival just gave them a new angle to work. So I've made things worse for you. Maybe. Cole moved back to the fire, his expression unreadable. Or maybe having someone else here will make them think twice. They don't know you can't shoot yet. They don't know you're not used to this life. All they know is I'm not alone anymore, and that changes the math of any fight they might start. Linda processed this information, her mind racing. She had gone from being unwanted by her family to being a pawn in a dangerous game she barely understood, but something in Cole's matter-of-fact assessment of the situation steadied her nerves. He wasn't trying to comfort her with lies or false reassurances. He was treating her like someone capable of understanding the truth. "Teach me," she said suddenly. Cole raised an eyebrow. "Teach you what?" "Everything. How to shoot, how to survive up here, how to defend this place if you're gone." Linda crossed her arms, determination replacing the fear that had gripped her moments before. "You said you need someone reliable. I'll be reliable, but I won't be helpless." For the first time since she had arrived, something like a smile tugged at the corner of Cole's mouth. It disappeared almost immediately, but she had seen it. "All right," he said. "Lesson 1 starts now." "See that woodpile outside?" Linda nodded. "It needs to be split and stacked before dark. There's an axe by the door. While you work, you'll be visible from the trail. Anyone watching needs to see you working. See you strong, see you as part of this place. Perception matters up here as much as reality." Linda walked to the door and picked up the axe. It was heavier than she expected, the handle worn smooth by years of use. She looked back at Cole, who was watching her with an intensity that made her nervous. "And if the Millers come back while I'm out there? Then you run for the cabin, and you don't stop running until you're through that door." Cole's voice was serious. "I'll handle the rest." Linda stepped outside into the afternoon sun. The air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and the distant promise of the storm Cole had predicted earlier. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, moving slowly toward the mountain. She walked to the woodpile, feeling exposed and vulnerable in the open space. The first swing of the axe jarred her arms painfully, and the log barely split. She gritted her teeth and swung again and again. Each impact sent shocks through her shoulders and back, but she kept swinging. This was her life now. This mountain, this cabin, this strange arrangement with a man who promised violence to protect what was his. She had been sold as useless, cast aside by her own family. But standing there with an axe in her hands and storm clouds gathering overhead, Linda made herself a promise. She would prove every single person who had dismissed her wrong. She would survive this. She would thrive here. The storm hit an hour later with the fury of something alive and angry. Rain pounded the cabin roof like fists demanding entry, and wind howled through the pines with voices that sounded almost human. Linda stood by the window, watching water pour from the sky in sheets so thick she could barely see the trees 20 feet away. "Good timing on that wood," Cole said from behind her. He was preparing dinner, working efficiently over the fire. The smell of cooking meat filled the cabin, making Linda's stomach growl. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten. "How did you know it was coming?" she asked, watching him work. The birds went quiet around noon. The wind shifted directions. "You learn to read the signs after enough seasons up here." He stirred something in the pot, then glanced at her. "You did well out there. Most city folks would have given up after a few swings." "I'm not from the city. My family had a farm before we lost it." Linda turned away from the window. "I know how to work." Cole nodded, seeming to file this information away. "Set the table. Food's almost ready." They ate in silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and the relentless drum of rain overhead. The stew was simple but good, thick with meat and wild onions. Linda ate slowly, savoring each bite and trying not to think about how different this meal was from the scarce rations her family had been surviving on. "Your father said you had sisters," Cole said suddenly, breaking the quiet. Linda's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "2. Helen and Margaret. Younger than me." "He tried to trade them too?" The question was blunt, but Linda appreciated the directness. "Helen's already married. Local shopkeeper's son. Margaret's only 15. She set her spoon down, her appetite suddenly gone. "I was the expendable one, the plain daughter who wouldn't fetch a good marriage. Better to get something for me than nothing at all. Cole studied her across the table. You're not playing. The word surprised her so much she looked up sharply. Cole's expression hadn't changed, his face as unreadable as ever, but there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip strangely. You don't have to say things like that, she said quietly. I don't say things I don't mean. Cole stood and collected the empty bowls. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start real training. Linda lay in the narrow bed that night, listening to the storm rage outside and the steady breathing of Cole sleeping on the floor by the fire. Everything about this situation was impossible and strange, yet somehow she felt safer here in this rough cabin with a man she barely knew than she had ever felt in her father's house. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having washed the world clean. Cole woke her before sunrise with a touch on her shoulder, and they began. He taught her to load and fire the rifle, how to sight down the barrel and control her breathing before pulling the trigger. Her first shots went wild, the recoil bruising her shoulder, but by midday she could hit a mark on a tree trunk from 30 paces. Not bad, Cole said, something almost like approval in his voice. Keep practicing. We're going to need every advantage we can get. You really think the Millers will come back? I know they will. The question is when and how many they'll bring with them. Cole cleaned the rifle with practiced motions. Jake has 4 brothers and at least a dozen ranch hands who will do whatever he says. We need to be ready. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Linda worked from dawn until dusk, learning the mountain and its secrets. Cole taught her which plants were edible and which were poison, how to read animal tracks in the dirt, how to move silently through the forest. She chopped wood until her hands bled and then toughened into calluses. She practiced with the rifle until the weight of it felt natural in her arms. At night, they talked. Cole revealed pieces of his past slowly, like someone dealing cards one at a time. He had been a soldier once, fighting in skirmishes along the frontier. He had seen friends die and had killed men himself, though he never spoke of it with pride or shame, just as facts of his existence. He had come to this mountain seeking solitude, a place where he could live on his own terms away from the violence and chaos of the world below. But the world follows you, Linda observed one evening, even up here. Always does, Cole agreed, staring into the fire. Question is what you do when it arrives. 3 weeks after Linda's arrival, it arrived. She was checking the traps Cole had taught her to set when she heard the horses. Multiple riders coming up the main trail with purpose. Her heart lurched into her throat as she grabbed the rifle she now carried everywhere and ran for the cabin. Cole was already outside, his own rifle in hand, watching the trail. His face was grim. How many? Linda asked, taking position beside him. 7, Jake brought reinforcements. Cole's voice was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. This is it. They're not here to talk. The riders came into view, spreading out as they entered the clearing around the cabin. Jake Miller sat at the center on a big black horse, his face twisted with anger and something uglier. Beside him were his brothers, hard men with cruel eyes. The others were ranch hands, armed with rifles and pistols. Last chance, Bennett, Jake called out. Give us the woman and we'll let you keep breathing. Otherwise, we'll burn you out and take her anyway. Linda's hands tightened on her rifle. Cole glanced at her, and in that moment something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. They were in this together now, for better or worse. You want her? Cole shouted back. Come and take her. The first shot cracked through the morning air, splintering the wooden post beside Cole's head. Linda dropped to one knee behind a water trough, her rifle already raised. Cole fired back, and one of the ranch hands screamed and fell from his horse. The clearing erupted into chaos. Horses reared and scattered as bullets flew in both directions. Linda sighted carefully and squeezed the trigger just as Cole had taught her, a man clutching his shoulder, stumbling backward. She worked the rifle's action, chambering another round, her hands steady despite the terror flooding her veins. Cole moved with deadly precision, each shot measured and deliberate. 2 more men went down, and suddenly the attackers weren't so confident anymore. They had expected an easy fight, one man defending a cabin. They hadn't prepared for a woman who could shoot. Fall back! Jake screamed, rage and disbelief warring in his voice. Get to cover. The riders scattered into the tree line, and the shooting stopped as both sides reassessed. Linda's ears rang in the sudden quiet. Smoke from gunpowder hung in the air like fog. You hit? Cole asked, not taking his eyes off the trees. No. You grazed my arm. Nothing serious. He reloaded quickly, his movements automatic. They'll try to circle around, come at us from different angles. Can't defend the whole cabin with just 2 of us. Linda's mind raced. The cellar. We could A crash from inside the cabin cut her off. Someone had gotten in through the back window while they were focused on the front. Linda spun around just as a ranch hand burst through the door, pistol drawn and aimed straight at Cole's back. She didn't think. Her rifle came up and she fired in one smooth motion. The man's pistol discharged into the ground as he fell, his eyes wide with shock. Linda stared at what she had done, her hands beginning to shake. "Linda!" Cole's shout snapped her back. "Move!" She dove sideways as bullets tore through the space where she had been standing. More men were coming from the trees, using their fallen comrades' distraction to rush the cabin. Cole fired rapidly, driving them back, but they kept coming. "Inside!" Cole ordered. "We can't hold the open ground." They fell back into the cabin, Cole slamming the door and dropping a heavy bar across it. Bullets punched through the wooden walls, sending splinters flying. Linda crouched low, reloading her rifle with trembling fingers. "The trap door?" she gasped. "We can use the cellar as a fighting position. They'll have to come down one at a time." Cole looked at her sharply, then nodded. "Good thinking. Go." Linda pulled up the trap door as Cole fired through the windows, keeping the attackers at bay. She dropped into the cellar, the smell of earth and fur thick in the confined space. The cellar had small ventilation grates set near the ceiling at ground level, perfect for shooting from. Cole followed her down, pulling the trapdoor shut above them just as the cabin door splintered under a barrage of boots and rifle butts. They could hear the men spreading out above, ransacking the cabin, searching. "They're gone!" someone shouted. "Must have run out the back." "Check everywhere." Jake's voice, poisonous with fury. "They can't have gotten far." Heavy boots stomped overhead. Linda held her breath, pressed against the damp earth wall. Beside her, Cole aimed his rifle at the trap door, waiting. If anyone opened it, they would die before they could even see what was below. Minutes crawled past like hours. Finally, Jake's voice rang out again. "Burn it!" "Burn the whole thing down. They're hiding somewhere, and smoke will drive them out." Linda's eyes went wide in the darkness. Cole's jaw clenched, and she could see him calculating odds and options. The cellar would become an oven, then a tomb. "We have to move," Linda whispered. "Not yet." Cole was staring up at the trapdoor, listening intently. "Wait for it." The smell of smoke began filtering down through the floorboards. Heat pressed against the wooden ceiling above them. Linda's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Cole remained utterly still, focused. Then Linda heard it. A distant sound growing louder. More horses, many of them, coming up the mountain trail fast. The men above heard it too. "Riders coming!" one of them shouted. "A lot of them. Miller gang," someone else yelled. "No, wait, those are Marshall's stars." Jake cursed viciously. "We're leaving. Everyone mount up. Now." The sound of panic movement overhead, men scrambling for the door on their horses. Cole waited until the hoofbeats faded into the distance before pushing open the trap door. Smoke poured into the cellar, but the cabin above was still mostly intact. The men had barely started the fire before fleeing. Cole climbed out and helped Linda up. Through the shattered windows, she could see a dozen riders approaching, led by a man wearing a marshal's badge that glinted in the morning sun. The marshal reined up outside the smoking cabin. He was an older man with gray in his beard and sharp, intelligent eyes. He looked at Cole, then at Linda with her rifle still in hand, then at the bodies in the clearing. "Cole Bennett," the marshal said, his tone neutral. "Got a report you were harboring a stolen woman up here." "She's my wife," Cole said flatly. "Legal and binding, and those men attacked my property. That true, ma'am?" Linda straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "I came here of my own choice. Cole Bennett is my husband. Those men tried to take me by force based on a debt my father had no right to use me to settle." The marshal studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Jake Miller's been causing trouble across 3 counties. Been looking for a reason to bring him in." He gestured to his deputies. "Track them. I want them in custody by nightfall." As the deputies rode off, the marshal dismounted and approached Cole. "You've made enemies, Bennett. Miller won't forget this." "I don't forget either," Cole replied. The marshal glanced at Linda again, something like respect in his eyes. "You picked yourself a fighter, I'll give you that." He swung back onto his horse. "We'll patrol this area more regular-like. Try to keep the peace." After the marshal and his men left, Linda and Cole stood in the damaged clearing, surrounded by the evidence of what they had survived. The cabin would need repairs, but it was still standing. They were still standing. Cole turned to her, and for the first time since she had met him, his expression was completely open. "You saved my life." That shot through the door. "You've saved mine multiple times since I arrived," Linda said quietly. We're even. No. Cole shook his head slowly. We're not even. We're partners. The words settled between them like a promise. Linda looked at the man who had bought her from a father who saw her as worthless, who had defended her against impossible odds, who had treated her with more respect and honesty than anyone in her previous life ever had. Partners, she agreed. Over the following months they rebuilt. The cabin was repaired and expanded, made stronger. Linda's shooting improved until she could match Cole shot for shot. Word spread through the territory about the mountain couple who had held off Jake Miller's gang, and other troublemakers began to give their land a wide berth. Cole taught Linda to run the trap lines, to process the furs, to negotiate with traders who made the difficult journey up the mountain, to prove to have a head for business that surprised even him, getting better prices than he ever had. Winter came fierce and deep, but the cabin was warm and their stores were full. On the long, dark nights, they talked less about survival and more about dreams, plans for the future. Maybe expanding the cabin into a real house. Maybe hiring help come spring. One evening, as snow fell soft and silent outside, Linda stood by the fire and looked at Cole reading by lamplight. He glanced up, caught her watching, and raised an eyebrow in question. "Just thinking," she said, "about how my family thought they were throwing me away, selling me to get rid of a burden." Cole set his book aside. "Their loss." "Yes," Linda agreed, a smile touching her lips. "Their loss entirely." She had been sold as useless, married to a lonely mountain man in a cabin at the edge of nowhere. Her family had seen it as a punishment, an ending. But standing there in the firelight, strong and capable and free, Linda knew the truth. It wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of everything she was meant to become. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, and the mountain kept its secrets. But inside the cabin, two people who had both been alone had found something neither had expected. They had found home. They had found purpose. They had found each other. And that was worth more than all the gold and all the territories combined.